They had burned the braziers low in the godswood, so the firelight was a suggestion against the snow rather than a stance. It barely dimpled the dark beneath the boughs. Beyond it, the snow made its own light, blue-white, that seemed to come from under the crust, as if the earth had remembered a buried sun. Thin snow still sifted down through the black lattice of branches in a sound like a breath held too long and let out slowly. It landed softly on the armrests of Bran's chair, on the shawl folded across his knees, on his hair like the touch of a careful hand. The weirwood's face was the whitest thing, scarlet leaves clotted with wet where melting licked them, the mouth shaped into the patient grief he had stared at all his life and would stare at to the end of days. He did not feel the cold now, not with the same exactness as another might. It came to him as a pressure in the bones he no longer moved, a diminuendo and crescendo in the humming behind his eyes, a thin music he had learned to read. Once he had felt cold as a boy feels it on a bad day, the sting in the fingers, the bite in the ears. Once he had known warmth in the simple way of boys, a hearth, a hand, a dog pressed like a second heartbeat. Now cold and warmth were histories that passed through him, and he followed their threads back until they showed him where they began to be knotted, where they broke, where they had been unspooled again by mercy. He had taught himself to think of it that way, as mercy. Healing was a word the living loved, a clean word with salves and stitches and the promise of tomorrow in it. Mercy was older and dirtier and more exacting. The tree had taught him that, or else the red sap that stained its mouth had. It remembered everything, so did he, and what he had done on that night when the dead came to Winterfell, what he had done when the wind itself had screamed with a voice like ice breaking under a city's weight. That had not been a healing in the smooth, tale-teller's sense. That had been mercy asserted against a current that had run too long. For a time the godswood remained more itself than the hall had been or the walls had been, because people did not crowd it with their fear or their instructions. When Bran lifted his eyes, he could count the snow-laden boughs the way he once had counted arrows in a quiver. He knew how many ravens perched and where, and which of them watched him with the bright, intelligent silence that meant he could lean, if he wished, and feel their breastbones in his own chest and their talons scratching the bark under him. He did not lean now. He had leaned too much that night. He had poured himself through the tree like spring water that had been winter once, and he had gone to the hill where no man who had gone alive had come back alive. No man except him in this strange way, and he had found a moment so old it seemed new, and he had joined his mind to the boy who would be bound to the trunk there, and to the woman whose hands had held the dragon glass, and to the roots that had drank the fear of both of them. He had not stopped it. People wanted that as an answer, clean as a sword through a knot. He had not stopped it because stopping it would have made another knot at once. He had made it softer. He had whispered to the woman with leaf hair and stone eyes, and he had set kindness under the blade the way one sets a wedge under a wheel while it is moved. And he had waited while the blade went in differently. He had waited while the roots drank differently. He had not asked the tree to forget. He had asked it to remember and remember and remember until remembering grew wider than vengeance. He thought of it the way Sam had explained after, finding a name in a book like a lantern in a cellar. A palimpsest. Writing on top of writing, the ghost of the first text showing through the second. The world had become that. He felt it as a lightness sometimes, a place where the weave was thin and whatever had been first shown through the day like a dream half remembered. He felt it as a heaviness sometimes, where two histories lay on each other like ice layers and creaked. The godswood creaked now, winter's small speech. Bran moved his hand slightly. The snow that had gathered in the hollow of his knuckles fell. He thought, Sansa will come. She always came before the kitchen fires at dawn were roused fully. She came when the hour was nothing in the keep, when the corridors were the color of slate and the stones sweated a little salt where old blood had been spilled. She came because she had learned a thing about ruling from the tree, about the way a heart has to be at once defenseless and unbreakable. She came because she had been taught to pray, once, and though the prayers had not carried her through, the act of listening for a reply had. So she came and she listened. He heard her before he saw her, the leather-soft hush of her boots, the faint intake of breath when the cold touched her throat, the way she never brushed against the trees that were not the weirwood for fear of snapping a twig. She stepped into the hollow, and the fire showed him her face without the mask she wore when petitioners laid their sorrows before her like baskets of cracked grain. There were the shadows from sleeplessness. There was the small light under her eyes that came of doing something difficult and knowing no one but the very old and the very young would ever notice. "Bran," she said, and because they were alone she did not call him your Grace of Ravens or any other strange title that had begun to creep like ivy into the keeps of men. She put her hand to his shoulder as she always did, not to steady him but to steady herself. He looked at her, and then he smiled in that slight way that meant he was in his body and not too far into the bark. "Sansa, we will need to mend the north wall of the south turret," she said at once, as if it were a confession. "The mortar there crumbled when the frost got under it. I have a mason for it, but not the stone. The quarry at Long Lake is buried. I have sent for a man in White Harbor who says he can bring granite by sledge down the winter road if we send bread as far as the Weeping Water to meet him." "You will send bread," Bran said, as if he could place that loaf on the road himself, hot in its linen. He saw the man's hands cracked. He saw the horse that would pull. He saw White Harbor with its gulls like tatters in a cold wind. He saw the Weeping Water as it moved under ice like a woman turning in her sleep. "I will," she said, "and I will turn the dead space in the old armory into a drying room for root vegetables. If the spring flood is slow, our stores will sour. The women say you were right about the flood." "I was not right," Bran said. "The river was." "The river told you," she said, "and it was not a question." She looked up at the weirwood. For a long moment she was quiet. Bran let the quiet be a bridge between them. He watched a flake of snow melt on the tang of her hair. He watched a spider draw its thread between two leaves despite the cold. "When you," she began and stopped. The fire breathed. The ragged arc of orange leaned and straightened. "When you did it on that night. The men say you asked Arya to do it, but then you did not. The old men say they saw blue eyes go dark like dying stars all at once. The women say they felt the cold relax. I felt something else, Bran. Not a death. A changing of mind. What was it?" He could have said, "The boy was afraid." He could have said, "The woman did not want to hate that way but had been told there was no other way." He could have said, "I put my cup under a stream that had run the same way for 1,000 years and the stream remembered a bend it had once taken." Instead he said, because he knew Sansa was learning how to carry many truths without breaking, "I took a stone out from under a wheel. The wheel had been rolling a long time. It will roll a long time yet. But once there was a groove cut where it did not have to be, and now there is a different groove." She looked at him, and he saw the part of her that still wanted stories. The part that once would have put her hand to her throat and sighed over a lemon cake. Then he saw the part that had buried father and brothers and a childhood within a year, and then again. She nodded slightly, not because she understood so much as because she had decided to hold the not understanding without vexing it into pieces. "Then we learn the new groove," she said. "We learn the turns of it, and what it will carry, and what will fall out of it and hurt us, and what will be left behind and mourned," Bran said softly. She looked away into the trees as if she was ashamed of what her face was doing. He let her. The Godswood had always been a place where a face could do what it needed to do. After a while she said, "Arya sleeps like a cat and wakes before dawn to run on the ramparts. She has cut her hair again into a boy's crop. She goes to the armory and mends her own straps without asking Gendry for help, though he would help if he could figure out how to say it without making a tangle of it." The corner of her mouth tilted with an affection she rarely allowed in the keep. "She says she is glad there was no king of ice to stab after all. She says the work was done, and anyway she does not like crowds." Bran's smile touched his eyes then. She would not have liked the crowd. "No," Sansa said, "but she likes Ghost. And Ghost likes her in the way a thing likes an echo of itself." She looked at Bran again. "Jon is far. He is far in the way letters cannot cover, though the paper says the right things. But I feel him. He is moving. He is gathering. The wildlings cling to him like burrs. The children climb him like a tree. I dream that the snow around him is empty. It is a strange empty. Not the empty before a storm. The empty after a crowd leaves the square and you can hear a thread drop. Bran heard it too, that wide, pure aftersound. He heard it in the forests beyond the wall when he ran with a wolf and the world smelled of blood and pine gum. He heard it in the places where the dead had fallen back into true death after that night. The empty was a mercy too. It was a silence that sometimes sounded like guilt. "He is learning the length of the emptiness," Bran said. "He is measuring whether it is safe to lay his loneliness down in it like a cloak." Sansa's breath clouded in the air. "He could come home," she said very low. "He could," Bran said. "But he will not be called by that word the way we are, not yet. His home is running away from him, so he has to follow it until it stops." He paused. The ravens shifted branches, feathers whispering. "You will make a home wide enough for him to come back to when he can." She said nothing to that, because silence was her strongest oath. She squeezed his shoulder, and then she stepped away, and after a few paces she turned back with the small, practical, weary question that meant she was going to be all right for another day. "Do you need anything in the way of eggs?" she asked. "Hara's hens have been lazy, but she can be bribed with little beer and straw. I can find you two if you want them." "I want you to eat them," he said. "I will eat one," she said. "The other I will give to the smallest stable lad. The one with the hair that sticks up like barley and the laugh that makes the horses turn their heads. They will follow his laugh out of the stables in a year," Bran said, with a flick of humor so quick it could have been the shadow of the raven's wing. Sansa's mouth made that shape again. "And I will follow my ledgers to bed," she said, and went away into the soft snow sound, leaving a lace of prints that filled as she left them. When she was gone, Arya came. Arya did not announce herself and could not have even if she had tried. She did not make a sound when she won. Ted not to. She appeared beside the weirwood as if she had been part of it all along. A thin figure with a boy's hair and a woman's balance. Needle hung with its familiar respect at her hip. She had wrapped her hands with strips of old linen to keep the knife burr from abrading her palms when she practiced with the long staff. There were sunburns in odd places on her face because she ran when the sun was bright even in winter, and she did not notice where it touched. She stood with her weight in the balls of her feet the way a dancer waits for the next step. She looked at Bran, and then at the carved eyes above him, and for a moment she seemed annoyed that the tree's face seemed to pity anything. "I had a dream," she said bluntly. Arya did not speak in tapestries. She spoke in beelines. "I had a dream that I ran on the wall and there was no wall, only the idea of it. I kept running and there was no ice to run on, and so I fell through the memory of it into the smell of it. Then I woke up." "What did it smell like?" Bran asked. "Old," Arya said, "but not rotten. Old like a drawer no one has opened because the letters in it will hurt if they are touched. Old like the place under the stairs where you were forbidden to hide when we were small, because it made people sneeze." "Dust," Bran said, amused. "Memory," Arya said, almost stubborn. Then she scuffed the snow with the heel of her boot and stared down at what she had made on the whiteness. "The wolves ran last night," she said. "Ghost went with them. I could not keep up." "You were not meant to," Bran said, and let his voice be kind. "He is as much air now as he is fur." "Air bites too," Arya said. "I went to the armory." Gendry had trudged out to the river with a tub to slake the last of the billets before they go soft and useless. "So I mended the strap at my shoulder and thought about cutting my hair shorter. I thought about taking a ship from White Harbor and going west until there's nothing." "Do you think there's anything?" "There is always something," Bran said. "I don't mean in the story way," Arya said, making a face. "I mean in the way you can put your hand into." "Yes," Bran said simply. She looked at him with suspicion and a little irritation at being comforted against her will. "I want something I can cut," she confessed as if she did not mean to. "Not a throat. A rope. A net." She drew a breath that showed him the rush she recognized and hated. "When there was a Night King, everyone wanted to cut him. It made me itch too. I am glad you took the itch away. She made an impatient gesture with her wrapped hands. "My hands have to be busy." "They will be," he said. "Not with the work the song wants for you." with the work that is not so pretty. It's prettier than it used to be, Arya said after a moment, and there was a smile like the ghost of the girl who had thrown food at Sansa hidden in it. I saw a child in the lower bailey this morning taking the ice off the pump handle with a spoon. She was making a tunnel, so the water would run through faster when the sun came. She got it right. She will be the mason at the south turret one day, Bran said. She can be, if someone doesn't make a lady of her, Arya said firmly, and touched the scar at her throat just once. A gesture not of pain but of catalog. Did you think about the snake that froze yesterday? The one in the still room. The way its skin looked like glass. As if there were another snake underneath it, swimming. I thought about it, Bran said. Did you think about the way the apothecary cried when it thawed and moved? Arya asked, and his face told her he had. Her own softened. He had named it. He thought it was his fault it went still. So when it moved he laughed. He laughed and cried. I wanted to cut the rope that was around his throat. You took it off first. No, Bran said. He did. I only untied the knot behind his head where he could not reach. She shifted her weight. You talk like a man who has carried sacks folded in half all morning, she said. All right. I will go to Gendry after breakfast and tell him that if he does not make rivets for the southern gate today, I will hide his favorite hammer. And I will go to the apothecary and tell him if he keeps snakes, he must keep them where sun finds them when it can. Her chin came up an inch. I was going to go to White Harbor. I wrote a girl there a letter and told her I would meet her. She has a boat and a laugh, and she kissed me once last summer in the dark by the fish market. But I will go later. There is mending to do. Bran felt a root shift somewhere miles away, a hair's breadth of movement that meant thaw in a place that had forgotten how. He reached for Arya's outline with his mind, not to hold her but to remember her exactly in this minute, the way you remember the first shard of sun after the longest night. Later, he agreed. Later, she said, and then flicked him a look under the dark hedge of her lashes that was pure stark mischief. You will tell me if you have another one of your palimpsest things, she added, mangling Sam's word because she liked how it felt, a strip of felt in the mouth. If there's a place I can practice where there wasn't one, I will, he said, and then, because he did not lie with the tree breathing under him, he added, if telling you won't make the place fall in on itself. Arya's smile understood that. She let the silence lie between them, an honest, windy thing, and then she went, her steps lighter than Sansa's, angrier than Sansa's, more like someone about to find a tightrope and run along at full tilt. When she had gone, the gods would held only Bran and the ravens and the old face with its calm, bleeding mouth. He leaned then. He let one small part of himself move into a raven's skull and feel the lever of its neck. He swelled the air under its wings. He rose into a place where the trees were a roof and the keep a toy iron castle in a maid. Anne's room. Winterfell's walls were furred with frost, a pelt on stone. In the yard he saw men stamping and blowing into their hands, boys breaking the ice in the horse buckets, women with baskets. He saw a boy with barley hair and the laugh Sansa had spoken of, his breath blooming like a ghost around his face as he carried a scoop of grain twice as big as he was to a mare who lowered her head as if to put her gratitude into the small center of him. Bran's sight fled farther. He looked for Jon. He found him north of the wall where there was no wall, in a white that had become a different white, a fullness instead of a hardness, the shift the world had made when the wheel's groove had changed. The absence of the others was not a hole. It was an open field after a harvest. It was the smell of stubble. It was less dangerous for not being full of a purpose that hated warmth, and more dangerous for being simply what it was. Winter with no enemy to define it. Jon sat on a fallen trunk with his elbow on his knee and his hand on Ghost's back. Ghost was bigger than he remembered, a ghost grown heavy. The wildlings camped around them like a flock caught at rest under the wing of a moving sky. There were the careful huts of brush and snow, the strings of fish they were teaching themselves to smoke without rancidness, the little pots, the children whose only game was a miracle. Tormund stood officiating over a spit with the solemnity of a septon, turning a rabbit without taking his eyes off a girl who had taken a fancy to wearing his bear cloak as if she owned it. Every now and then he said, to no one in particular, I knew a queen once who tried to teach me to eat with a knife. By the end, I learned to drink with one, and laughed like a landslide. Jon was quiet in the way that did not mean he was empty. It meant he was full and did not trust the seam. He lifted his hand and laid it on Ghost's head and scratched in that notch behind the ear, as if he knew exactly where it was. He looked up once and Bran knew he felt him, the way a man feels when someone he loves remembers him at the same moment for no reason. Jon's eyes were the same gray they had always been. A scar made his face look like someone had folded it once and regretted it. He looked down at a boy playing with a length of leather and said something Bran could not hear. The boy laughed, showing a gap where a tooth would be for 6 more winters. Jon smiled then, and the cut in him mended a thread. "Here," he said aloud, not knowing to whom. "Sit. Eat." He lifted a hand to a shadow beyond the fire. It moved. A woman came into the fringe of light with the careful caution of a creature who has learned to listen for what you intend and not what you say. She had hair the color of dried moss and eyes like ice with sky under it. And Bran knew her for the kind of story the first men had told in awe and the Undulls had told to frighten children. She was not an other and she was not a woman. She was something the palimpsest had left when the first writing yielded to the second. Jon's hand did not drop. "Come," he said again, and it was a word that had gotten him killed once and had saved men more times than he would ever know. The woman came. The wildlings did not move because Tormund did not move. Ghost sniffed, amused. Jon held the rabbit out on the end of the spit, and the woman did not lift her hand to take it because she did not remember what hands were for in that way. He laid it on the snow between them like a gift he did not name, and she looked at it, and then at him, and some old mechanism in her face tried to make the shape of question or gratitude and relaxed without making it. "Eat," Jon said gently, "or leave it for the fox. It's not mine anymore." The woman bent, and the movement was so exact and so slow Bran could have read its description in a book about what snow used to be. She smelled the meat. Her nostrils flared like a foal's. She reached then, hand uncertain, and tore a small shred away and put it on her tongue with the caution of one who has eaten only wind for a long time. Her eyes closed. When they opened, something had moved behind them that might have been hunger and might have been sorrow. She took another shred. She did not look up when she said in a voice like frost on glass, "We were never made to be without a house. We are making houses," Jon said simply. He gestured at the brush huts with a small smile that contained Tormund's laugh, and the rabbit, and the boy's missing tooth. The woman looked. She did not understand. Then she almost did. She turned her head toward the north, where there had been nothing but a meaning for centuries, and her mouth made that not smile again. "The house we had was a wound," she said. "We slept in it and woke into it and could not die in it. You closed it." She looked back at Jon with a tenderness so large it was almost cruelty. "We are cold. The true cold is smaller than the old cold. It fits us again." Jon nodded as if she had told him the weather. "Good," he said. "That's good." She looked at Ghost, and for a second in that old, deep magic way she saw him the way Bran saw him sometimes, as a story of snow given a heart and teeth. She tore another shred from the rabbit and put it down on the snow. Ghost bent and licked it up with a delicacy that was almost comical in something so vast. The woman's face did not move except to ease in a place no one would have noticed who had not watched every muscle in horses and men and dogs for years. She turned toward the north again. "There are bodies," she said. "There are bodies, and we do not know how to bury them. We were never told. There were so many we did not learn." She looked back at Jon. "Will you learn with us?" "Yes," Jon said, as if it were a simple vow. "We will bury them." "Sing," she said. "Sing the songs that do not call us. Sing the ones that say sleep. We will learn the words in our hands." Bran fell back into Himsel. Like a leaf slipping on snow. He sat under the weirwood and felt the roots shift again. The smallest yes. He let out a breath that drew mist into the cold air. He had not noticed he was holding it. He heard, distantly, the clatter of the first pots in the kitchens and the grunt of the first pig turning in disgust that it had to be awake. The castle stretched, a cat arching its spine after a long watch. The berry girls went out with baskets and came back with none because winter had eaten the berries and left seed catalogs. The seamstresses opened drawers that had been closed since autumn and coughed and laid out wool with movements like prayer. A boy with bad boots hopped on one foot over the puddle beside the ash bin and missed and laughed anyway. Winterfell was an animal with many stomachs, chewing, digesting, turning cold into heat in innumerable small ways. Samwell came out of the lower library with the look of a man who had accidentally married books and found the marriage agreeable. He had a parchment in his hand that was trying to curl into itself like a leaf, and he had a piece of charcoal in his mouth like a man who had forgotten whether he had eaten. He was shaking his head in a private conversation with no one, and every few steps he stopped to write on the back of his hand because the parchment refused to be written on as if it had thoughts about the text already inscribed there. He had grown thinner, which for Sam meant he had become less apologetic about taking up space. Gilly walked beside him with her shawl over her head and the child asleep against her chest, and every now and then she reached over without looking and pulled the charcoal out of Sam's mouth and put it back correctly between his fingers. She did it with the absent intimacy of a woman who had taught a man to keep his shirt buttoned and found it more difficult than teaching him to save the world. Sam reached the place where the snow had been trampled enough to reveal a strip of frozen mud. He stopped, narrowed his eyes at the parchment as if it had an attitude, and said, 97. Gilly made a small noise that meant either affection or exasperation depending on the day. 97 what? Songs about walls, Sam said, and then flushed because he had not meant to say that out loud where it might be heard by someone like Tormund who would tell him to drink more beer and fewer songs. Walls that are, Gilly said, amused. Or walls that were. Walls that were, Sam said, and his voice went soft. But I think they will be again, only not of stone. Not of ice. Walls of habits. Walls of agreements. I can feel the words moving. He tapped the parchment, and it flexed in his hand like a fish. The palimpsest, doesn't like me, he added mournfully. It doesn't have to like you, Gilly said. You don't need it to like you. You need it to keep still. She took the parchment from him with the briskness of a nurse and held it against her chest with the sleeping child as if containing two testy things at once were something she did as a matter of course. Sam's mouth made a line, and then it curved up. I will write on my arm, he said, and did, the charcoal making a clumsy script on skin. Bran watched him with a tenderness that was more dangerous for being large. Sam had been the first to name the thing he felt happening. He had come into the Godswood the morning after the night and said, breathless, we are all scribes now, as if it had been the worst of news and the best, and he had explained the word and then mispronounced it 3 times for affection, and then said, books are used to being written over. People aren't. We will have to learn to be. Slowly. Tyrion came a week later with a cart of wine that he refused to pour until he had walked the length of the wall and counted the cracks. He had a cloak given him by a woman in Wintertown because he had solved her roof with a ladder and a strip of sailcloth, and he wore it with the awkward pride of a man who had been given something warm for once without payment demanded later in another coin. He stood under the shadow of the weirwood and looked up at the face and said, you are venerated without choice. I empathize. And then he sat on the bench and rubbed his hands together briskly against the cold and said, well then, who shall we now be? Alive, Sansa said, who had come at once when he entered the wood because she had learned something else about ruling from the tree, that some conversations grew wrong if they moved under a roof where the ceiling listened. We shall be alive, and we shall see how we like it. Tyrion's eyes moved to Bran, and he folded his clever fingers. And you're Bran. You have done something very impolite on behalf of the world. You have revised a myth. Poets despise that. They are worse than lords when their territories are disturbed. The poets are busy, Bran said. They are writing a new winter and are too occupied with their own hearts to come after my bark with a knife. At least you are modest, Tyrion murmured and smoothed his beard. I have come, besides counting cracks, to tell you that King's Landing is currently flourishing in the manner of a wound that has scabbed. The merchants have returned like flies. The men who make bricks have never been so happy in their lives. It is amazing what a good disaster can do for an honest trade. Who sits the chair? Sansa asked without letting the question lean too far in any direction. An arrangement of steel that can be mistaken for authority if you are hungry enough to believe in it, Tyrion said. The Dragon Queen has removed herself to Dragonstone for the present, and I have made myself disagreeable by insisting that salted meat be put aside for fishermen whose boats will be rebuilt in the spring. I left because I was told that the North needed to be reminded that it is a part of the body whether it likes the liver. He lifted a hand in a small oppo. Logi, I will not tell you what to do. There were years when men told you what to do. I have no appetite to be among their number. Good, Sansa said. Then drink your wine and see where you might be useful. He grinned without offense. You remain the most attractive lord in the North, he said, and then noticed the look in her eye and made a tiny court bow toward the weirwood. Apologies to the true lord, he said, with sincerity rare in him. Bran did not mind. He had no head for wine and little for the court. He let them talk. He felt for Jon again, for the woman of the palimpsest walking north with rabbit fat on her tongue, for the thrum of all the knot wounds beginning to knit. By the time the sun rose, the godswood had drunk enough light that the snow lost its inner glow and became a modest blanket. The ravens launched themselves one by one into a sky the color of a pewter plate that had been washed and not dried and would spot if left too long without attention. The cooks banged lids. The first argument of the day rose in the lower yard and died with the first joke. Men drew lines where there would be walls and women drew lines where there would be gardens. The sound of the hammer began, steady, unavoidable, the beat of a heart in a chest that worried about it and could not stop worrying because worrying was a way of loving. Bran watched, and then he let the watching move into a deeper watching. He went to the hill again because you must visit the site of mercy twice if you mean to keep it. He moved through the roots as a fish moves through water it has not yet learned to distrust. He found again the boy with the face that looked like any boy's would look if you told him he had to be a story forever. He found again the woman with the small fierce hands and the jaw set to hate because someone had told her hate was the tool that would set the world right. He found the moment when the blade that would make a king of night had not yet done so. He did not stop it. He only put his voice there again, very small, smaller than a breath, and he said, "You can make a tool that cuts and you can make a tool that loosens. What do you need?" He did not expect answer because the past never made noise unless you were careful with it. This time, perhaps because he had been careful before and because care attracts care, the woman's eyes lifted from the boy's clenched teeth and met his through 700 winters. She did not start. She did not speak his name. She did not have a name for him. She only moved her hand the way a midwife moves a hand to catch a child that will not turn, and she adjusted the blade a breath's width. The roots drank differently. The old song changed a note. The boy gasped, and this time the sound he made was not rage. It was grief, and then, very small under it, relief. It made no sound in the godswood at Winterfell much larger than a man swallowing. Bran let himself cry, the way the face in the tree did, without force and without diffraction. When he came back entirely, he was ready to hear Davos Seaworth's voice, which meant that Davos had found the kitchens and learned whose eyes to look into to make the butter appear. Davos came into the godswood carrying a loaf under his arm and a skepticism he wore as if it were a hat. He had a look about him that said he had already made 3 inventories before breakfast. Of spoons, of boards, of opportunities to save men from their own cleverness. He kissed the air near Sansa's hand without touching it, because Davos understood that respect and reverence were not the same. He gave Bran the smallest of nods and did not try to talk to the tree. "My lords," he said, and then, because there were women, "My lady." "Lord Davos," Sansa said, "what do you think of the south turret?" "It's been standing since a time when no one had to count turrets," Davos said, with an affection he reserved for old things that had not asked to be tested. "I think it will stand longer if we put a bandage of good stone around its middle. I think men will argue about whether it needs it. I think we should do it anyway. I think the river will rise in a month and we would be fools to have our feet in it up to the ankles and be surprised. And I think I am glad I grew up digging in other men's salt because it taught me what a leak sounds like." Tyrion looked delighted. "Do you write your poetry down? Or does it float away after it saves our lives?" "It's no poetry," Davos said. "It's counting. Counting's not much admired until a debt comes due. Then everybody calls you brother. I call you brother now, Sansa said, and meant it. Something unguarded crossed Davos's face then, and he looked away into the branches as if embarrassed that a thing had touched him. He said, gruff, which for Davos meant pierced. In the days that followed, the work of Winterfell became the work of the North, became the work of a mended winter. Notes traveled on men and on ravens and on women who walked in pairs. Pots traveled. Songs traveled, changing their feet to match the road. The wall around the south turret took shape under hands steady and hands anxious. When stone ran low, Sansa traded a barrel of honey to a beekeeper who had taken his hives in to sleep under blankets and was willing to part with what the bees had no more need of for the price of half a dozen bricks. The beekeeper's beard sang. The bricks were stacked. Arya put them in place with her small, strong hands because she liked to feel a weight settle. In the nights, the gods would spoke and Bran listened. Sometimes he went far, to Dragonstone, where the queen walked the outline of an island made of fable and basalt and grief. Her dragons were quieter now. They slept and dreamed molten things and woke with sweet smoke at their nostrils. She had a look like a woman who has been given a very long corridor to walk and does not yet know whether she will end in a door or an open sky. Sometimes he went nearer to the kitchens, where the old cook who had called him boy, even when he had become other than a boy, had died with her hand inside a chicken and her last word had been salt. And a girl had taken her place with tears on her apron and grown into the apron within a week by the only magic that never failed: repetition. Sometimes he went north, to the woman of the new old cold, who had begun to hum when they buried their dead. A tune with no words that made men's hands steadier and made Tormund sniff and declare he had a cold in his nose. Once, when the moon made the snow an ocean of broken plates, Bran went west, because Arya had asked and because the tree was curious. He saw water become heave and then glass and then heave again. He saw gulls that had no patience for men. He saw a whale roll the size of a keep turning over in a bed. He saw, very far and very faint, a shape like land and like story, the sort of place that would make a girl cut her hair again and tie down her heart against flattery. He pulled back. He did not look too hard. He had learned that looking can be a kind of violence if you are bigger than what you look at. In the morning he told Arya only, "There's always something." She nodded and said, "Good," and did not cut her hair any shorter that day. She mended a strap. She threw snowballs at Gendry and missed on purpose and hit him on purpose and laughed anyway. One afternoon, Sansa held court in the Great Hall because it must be done, and the Great Hall was drafty because it must be also. She sat in the chair that had belonged to a man whose sons had carved his name on it with a knife as boys do and regretted as men. The chair creaked. The fire burned. People came. A woman came with a baby who slept all the while and a goat who did not. The goat was the matter. It had eaten a book. It had eaten a book because the book had been left at a height a goat could reach and because goats are Democrats. The book belonged to Sam. Sansa listened to each of them. The goat was uninterested in governance. Sam was interested in making goat horns into a binding that would shame pride and lock words to paper forever. Sansa decided the goat was to be paid for the paper with 2 buckets of oats and a place to live where it could not eat history. Sam was to read aloud 3 evenings a week to anyone who came, that they might carry the writing in their mouths if not on their shelves, and he was to take a boy with him who would learn to paint letters on boards with pitch. Sam glowed. The woman glowed. The goat snorted and chewed. After they went, Tyrion leaned forward and said under his breath, "You are making the law outside of the law. Good. That is the only place a real law can breathe." "Law is like bread," Sansa said. "You make it in the morning and eat it by evening, and tomorrow you make it again. And sometimes you leave it out and the goats eat it," Tyrion said. "Sometimes," Sansa said. "And sometimes that is the blessing too." Evenings that winter had a waiting quality, the way a cloak hung beside a door waits for the hand. The light went early, but instead of panic, the early dark carried a steadiness. People were tired in the good way, the way that makes a bed an altar. Bran sat with them sometimes in the hall, his chair back to the fire. He looked at the faces he had known since they were small or since he was. He looked at new faces with old eyes. He listened to the new songs and to the old songs with new notes. Tormund sang a piece that began as brag and ended as prayer, and no one remarked on the slight wetness at the corners of his eyes. Tyrion told a story about a man who had wanted to sell lies in the market and had discovered the lies had bought him instead. And everyone laughed too hard because the laughter had the air of a man taking a breath for the first time after a long cold. One night, the hound arrived with 2 pigs and a look that said he had not expected to live this long and was annoyed at being surprised. He grunted at Sansa with a complicated embarrassment that would have been rage once. He grunted at Arya with a simpler embarrassment. He grunted at Bran and the tree because he did not know how not to. He slept 3 days in the stables and woke and built a fire in a place that should never have had a fire, except that he built it and sat a careful distance from it and stared into it for hours without a sound. And when he moved again, his shoulders sat a fraction lower. He told Tormund a story about a hen, and Tormund slapped him sober with laughter, and the hound smiled in the dark where no one could be accused of seeing. It was all so ordinary, the ordinariness threaded through with marvel until the two could not be unpicked from each other. That was the new groove. That was the way the wheel turned. The river rose in a month because Bran said it would, and because rivers do what they do regardless of boys who see them. It rose slow and heavy and patient, and it kissed the lip of the road the way a tide kisses the step of a house that has learned to live with tides. Men swore, women swore, children kept score and determined when it would pass. The south turret bandage held. Sam read from a book no goat had eaten. The woman of the old cold sang over graves. She learned to dig by doing it with hands so careful it made the wildlings curse delicately out of respect. Jon made a cairn with stones the size of secrets carried for a long time. He said nothing because his words were needed elsewhere. He put his hands on stones and it was enough. One morning, very early, Bran woke with sap in his mouth. He could taste the iron of it. The godswood was hushed the way rooms are hushed when a child is asleep in them. A new feeling moved under the snow. It was not danger. It was not simple weather. He touched it with his mind the way he would touch the back of a horse to learn what day the horse thought it was. He felt a traveling. He sat taller in the sea. Hair without meaning to. He put his hand on the wood and let the wood be as close to him as a cloak. They came at noon, which in winter is a kind of dawn. The men on the walls shouted once and then did not shout, because shouting would have made a snow-on-stone crumble the wrong way. They came up the long way that had been beaten enough to be simply frozen earth, and there were 5 of them and 7 of them and 3 of them and none of them, because the palimpsest makes numbers soft. They were the children and they were not. They were the oldest thing that had ever walked south of the line where maps end in drawings. They were green and gray, and they made no mark on the snow because the snow recognized them and withheld itself. They came to the godswood without any of the keep's doors minding. They came and stood in front of the weirwood as if they had made an appointment very long ago and were on time. Sansa stood to the side with her hands clasped, all pride left in her room and all courage worn like a ring. Arya stood with her weight forward, her throat bare, her hand on needle, not to draw it. Tyrion stood with his wit folded small, as if it were something that might startle. Davos did not stand much at all, because standing sometimes makes fear take offense. He leaned against a tree and looked like a sailor who finds himself on a mountain and pretends his legs no stones. Sam came with his book that the goat hadn't eaten and then stopped where he could see without being seen. Bran sat because Bran sat and because roots had kept him. The one who had moved the blade a breath width looked at him. Her eyes were leaves laid flat and pressed in a book years ago and turned fragile. She looked at the other faces without fear or curiosity, simply to put them where they were. She looked at the weirwood. Then she knelt, not to the face but to the memory that the face was, and put her head down and said in that voice that made words sound like winter's patient work, "We remember. We come to return what is not ours. We held it too long. It grew heavy." Sansa's face changed as understanding came into it, the understanding of a woman whose house has been carrying a weight she did not know to name. She stepped forward, not too close. "What do you bring?" she asked, because Sansa could ask things that sounded like titles and made everyone responsible. The woman lifted her head. She opened her hand, and in it there was a piece of night blacker than shadow. It did not sing in the way that a blade sings. It hummed in the way roots do. It was dragonglass. It was the idea of dragonglass. It was the debt of it. "We took," the woman said. "We took because we were told to take, and because the taking made a song we could dance to while the cold ate our bones. We took a man and made him an answer to a question the trees were not asking, and we were proud. We have learned something now. We learned it when that boy—" And here her eyes rested on Bran as if he were an old tree and a new one in the same hour. "When that boy put his finger on the line we had made and made it less sharp, we learned because the not wind quieted. We learned because we could hear the drip of thaw and it was more beautiful than the scream. We bring this back. We bring our promise to stop. We bring our late apology." The slightest grimace made her mouth look new. Late apologies weigh more. Bran's throat ached as if something had been sitting there all winter and had finally decided to shift and let him breathe deeper. He did not speak because this was not the place for him to speak. He looked at Sansa. Sansa lifted her hand, and it was the same hand that had signed 100 orders and pressed against the faces of children and gotten very good at recognizing which small hurts hid big ones. It was the same hand that had learned to look as if it were steady when it was shaking. She extended it. The woman stood and put the dragonglass in Sansa's palm, as if she were placing a tired bird that had decided to live into a hand it could trust. Sansa closed her fingers around it. For a moment, her face altered. She saw the hill. She saw the blade. She saw the boy's mouth and the way it had opened not in fury. She saw the old song change its note. Tears with no heat in them touched her eyes. She set her jaw and then relaxed it because some habits die loudly and some can be let go like a set-down basket. "We will keep it," she said. "We will keep it in a place no goat can reach. We will tell its story in a way that is not a weapon." "You will forget it?" Tyrion murmured. "And that will be as much a mercy as a cruelty." But he did not say it too loudly, because forgetting has to be courted gently. The woman looked at Bran again. "We will leave," she said. "We were never meant to belong here as kings. We will belong like stones belong. You have made a groove where we can settle." "I did not make it," Bran said. "I only found it and showed it to your hand." "Then you did what a good river does," she said, and used his word back at him without knowing it had been his. "You made space for a bend." She turned, and one by one the others turned with her, and they left the way they had come, their feet making no print, not because they were spirits but because snow has favorites. After, the air in the gods would seemed emptied of an old caution no one had named. The light changed, the way light changes in a room when someone moves a heavy chair and sets it with its back to the wall at last. People breathed deeper. Sam wrote furiously on his arm because the parchment in his hand had decided to become a leaf again and curl into itself and fall away from what men need. Davos stared at the dragonglass in Sansa's hand and then at his own hands as if counting calluses. Arya let her fingers brush the daggers back without desire. Tyrion poured wine into 5 cups and then into 6, and when there was a 7th he laughed at himself because he had 4s. In something he had not meant to. The days lengthened then. It is in their nature. The palimpsest did not stop. Sometimes men remembered a thing, and sometimes the same men remembered the thing differently the next hour and had to decide whether to fight about it. Often they did not. It became a sort of sport to tell both versions and see which one made the soup taste better. A woodcarver came up from White Harbor and carved the new note into the old Weirwood song without touching the face. He carved a boy's mouth remembering relief. He carved a woman's hand at work. People stood in front of it and felt stubbornness untie. John wrote once. A letter carried by a boy who had 6 different smiles and each of them could get him food. The letter smelled of smoke and dog. Said only, "We buried them. We learned that when the ground gives you back a jawbone you do not owe the tooth your life." "Tell Bran," the woman sang, and I think I almost knew the words. "Ghost is fat and laughs at me. He does not laugh where I can hear it, but he laughs. Tormund says spring is when your hands do not hurt when you open them. I would not have known that without him. There is a boy here who looks like me but with better luck. He likes to sit on my shoulders and pretend I am a horse. He told me if I were a horse I would be too stubborn to bite. I hope the south turret holds." He signed it with a name he still did not wear easily, and he put a dot under it as if to nail it to the paper. Sansa read it and folded it and unfolded it and folded it again. She sent back bread. She sent the boy with 6 smiles back with a 7th and a warm sausage and a little wooden horse carved by the woodcarver who made new notes on old songs. She sent Ghost a bit of leather that had belonged to a glove of John's when he was a boy, and Ghost slept on it as if he had grown sentimental like a man. She sent Bran nothing because she knew Bran did not want a thing he could not put in his hand. She sat with him instead and watched the fire and counted the cracks in the hall, which were fewer now. In late winter, a rumor came from the south. It came on a trader's cart with onions whose skins were thin as decision, and on a maid's cousin who had seen smoke from a far road. It said, "The queen has gone to the river with men who move like men who have learned to move in places where the ground changes under you." It said, "She went to look at water, as if she had never seen any before." It said, "A dragon was seen reflected where there was no dragon." It said, "Someone has decided to listen to someone they did not think they would listen to." It had the feel of a story not yet sure of its own conclusion. It did what rumors do. It entered Winterfell and hung about the rafters like a spider until someone decided whether to watch it or knock it down. Tyrion said nothing. That was how Sansa knew to think hard. She did not ask the godswood for a prophecy. She asked it for patience. It belongs to trees to be patient. She borrowed some and put it in her pocket the way a woman puts a pebble there to remember to touch it when she speaks to someone who would otherwise unnerve her. That night, Bran dreamed a thing that was not a dream. He has learned to know the difference. The dream that was not a dream was of a room lit by oil lamps and by the thin swaying light of a brazier. A room with walls that sweated damp because the sea had its hand on them. There were maps. There were a dozen melted candles that no one blew out because they liked how they gathered on tables like small towns after feast. There was a woman looking at the river's path, not as if she meant to force it, but as if she wanted to ask it a question it might answer if the grammar were right. There was a man beside her whose hair had gone gray in one night. Not because anyone had wounded him, but because he had watched something he could not control, and it had humbled him without breaking him. There was a dragon outside, sleeping with its face on its forelegs like an old dog in sun that remembers every sky it has ever flown in, and it was not killing anyone. Bran woke with his mouth full of sap again and smiled, small and exact. He leaned back against the tree. He thought of how far there was still to go and did not despair, because despair is a kind of arrogance, and he had no appetite for it. He let himself be a boy for a moment, a boy who had been shoved out a window and had learned to fall into a different kind of life. He thought of snow as a toy and of fire as a pet and of soup as a miracle. He thought of his sister's hands and of Jon's quiet and of Arya's impatience and of Sam's arm full of words and of Tyrion's wine poured not as a wound and of Davos's counting that saved lives and of a woman of ice humming a tune with no words over a grave. When the dawn came, it came the way it always did, as if no one had earned it. The light set the snow ablaze without heat. Bran listened to the day. He put his face to it the way you put your face to a wind and recognize where it has been. He thought, we are learning to live in the wake of a mercy, and it is more difficult than an enemy in some ways and kinder in all. He thought, the old songs do not stop. They learn new verses. He thought, the wheel is moving. We will feel new ruts and they will jolt us and make us drop pails, and then we will learn to lift differently. Someone laughed in the yard. Someone else cursed in a language that had no letters. The world went on. The river rose and fell. The woman went north and sang to the buried until the men sang without her and did not know, at night, if they had learned it or always known it. Jon went with Ghost beside him and a boy on his shoulders and did not think of himself as king of any of it. Arya went to the armory and then to the wall and ran its length and used the running to burn something that would otherwise have hurt someone. Sansa went to the hall and judged and fed and counted and cried on. See, in a pantry where no one saw her because a jar of honey smelled exactly like a room in a house she would never see again. And then she wiped her face with the curtain and went back to choose brick or stone. Sam went to his chair and put the Book of Goat and Apology in a wooden box with a lid carved by the woodcarver and put a rock on it to keep it from flying away because some words want to. Tyrion wrote Dany a letter he did not send and then roasted onions and made a joke that did not hurt anyone. Davos taught a boy to tie a knot that would not slip when the boat took water. Bran closed his eyes. He moved his mind into the old roots. He put his hand on the place where the blade had gone and found it a little less sharp every time. He listened for the song of vengeance and heard instead the small, insistent, unlovely song of labor. He thought, this is the peace we have earned, and like all honest peace it looks like work. Out beyond the last farm, where the snow had shallow places and the heather looked like a congregation of small brown hats, a fox stepped delicately exactly in its own tracks as if remembering was a game. Over the hills, the sun made a smear of gold as if God had dragged his thumb while the paint was wet. In a house that had never had a south wall until last week, a woman set a pot on a new-built shelf and smiled because the shelf did not tilt. In the stables, Ghost snored like a man. In the barracks, the hound dreamed of a chicken crossing a road and woke laughing and then scowled at himself and said aloud, "Fool!" On the wall that was no longer a wall, a child stood and peed into the wind and learned a lesson. In the citadel, an old man woke knowing 3 poems and forgot his wife's name for 1 hour and then remembered it with a pain like love and went back to sleep with his mouth open. On Dragonstone, the queen traced the river on the map and asked aloud, so softly no one heard, "Where do you want to go?" And then she did not move for a very long time, and then she moved a little. The winter did not end because winters do not end all at once, and because endings are not their habit. It softened. It learned itself again. The world did not know to celebrate that kind of victory, and so it celebrated the things it knew. Thick soup, roofs that did not leak, mended straps that held a sword where you put it when you wanted your hands to do something else. Bran sat under the tree, and the tree held him, and there was work, and there was waiting, and there was the knowledge that some men would find the new groove lurching and hate it, and that some would try to make a king of night out of anything simply because kings give them something to kneel to. He was not afraid. He did not think to himself, "I have saved anyone," or "I have ruined anything." He did not think, "I am wise," or "I am a child." He thought only of the work at hand, the next breath, the next whisper to a root, the next small adjustment that could make a weight bearable. And in the quiet between his thoughts, in the gentle, almost comic, domestic noise of a keep that had outlived men's ideas of it, the old face in the tree looked out and bled its red sap and made no complaint at all. The mercy had taken. The wound had not closed. It had become a scar that no longer dictated the gait of the world. The rest of the work, the walking with that healed place, the learning to turn without flinching, that would take a long time. It would require patience. It would require the skill of hands and the adjustment of hearts. It would require jokes that did not draw blood. It would require counting. It would require a girl to hold a spoon to a pump and carve an ice tunnel and leave it for the sun to finish. It would require a man to hand a rabbit to a woman who had once been an answer to a question no one should have asked, and then to sit with her while she learned hunger. It would require a boy to learn that the world can be written over without his name being erased from it. Bran smiled, very small. The snow fell, and then it stopped, and then it began again, the way it does, undecided and indifferent to men's notions of drama. The day leaned forward. Winterfell breathed in and out, and the ravens returned one by one to the boughs and shook themselves dry, and somewhere outside the walls a child shouted with the fury of having fallen and the triumph of having gotten up. The wheel turned. The groove held. The story did not end. Changed its mind.